My son looked me straight in the eyes and said, "Mom, you have COVID. Don't come near my wife." That was the moment my life changed. All I had done was cough. Just one small cough while standing in the kitchen that morning, holding a mug of warm tea. My throat felt a little scratchy, the way it does when the weather changes. I remember apologizing softly, covering my mouth with my sleeve. But my son Daniel froze like I had just dropped a bomb in the middle of his house. He stepped back quickly. "Mom, that sounded bad," he said. I tried to laugh it off. "Oh honey, it's nothing. Just a little cough." But his face hardened. "Don't move," he said sharply. Before I could even understand what was happening, he pulled out his phone and started searching things. His wife, Lauren, came into the kitchen and asked what was wrong. "Mom might have COVID," he said loudly. The word hung in the air like poison. COVID. I felt my heart sink. "Daniel," I said calmly, "it's just a cough." But he wasn't listening anymore. Within minutes, everything escalated. He told me I couldn't stay in the main part of the house anymore. He said it was too dangerous for Lauren. "Mom, you'll have to stay in the back section of the house," he said, pointing toward the old storage wing we barely used anymore. That part of the house was cold, dusty, and half forgotten. It had once been used for storage and old furniture. "Just until we're sure," he said. But his tone didn't sound temporary. It sounded final. I stared at him in disbelief. "You're isolating me for a cough?" "It's for everyone's safety," he replied. Then came the rule that hurt the most. "Mom, don't come near Lauren. Not even close. If you need food, you'll have to cook for yourself back there. Please don't enter the main house." For a moment I couldn't speak. This was the same boy I raised. The same little boy who used to run into my arms after school. And now he was acting like I was something dangerous. Still, I didn't argue, because mothers rarely do. So I packed a small bag and walked slowly toward the back section of the house. The door closed behind me with a heavy click. That was the beginning of my 30-day prison. The first night was the hardest. The room smelled like old wood and dust. The heater barely worked. There was a tiny kitchenette with a broken cabinet and a single burner. No one checked on me. Not even once. Days passed. Sometimes I heard Daniel and Lauren laughing in the main house while I sat alone in silence. I cooked simple meals for myself. Soup. Rice. Sometimes just toast. But something else began to bother me. Money. My savings. I had trusted Daniel with my bank access months earlier, so he could help manage some bills online. But now, small withdrawals started appearing. At first it was a few $100s. Then more. And more. One night I overheard Daniel talking on the phone. "Yeah, Mom won't notice," he said casually. My chest tightened. That's when I realized something terrible. My son didn't actually care whether I had COVID or not. The isolation, the fear, the distance. It was convenient for him. Because while I sat locked away like a sick stranger, he was quietly draining my savings. And the worst part? One evening he came to the door and said something that chilled me to the bone. "Mom, if this keeps going, I might have to move you somewhere else permanently." Somewhere else. Like I was a burden. Like I wasn't family anymore. That night I lay awake staring at the ceiling. My heart was broken. But something else was slowly replacing the sadness. Clarity. Because the next morning, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to stay trapped in that room. And what my son didn't know yet was that his mother was about to disappear. And when I returned, I was going to make him regret every single day he treated me like a disease. But what happened the night I secretly walked out of that house changed the entire story. And trust me, Daniel never saw it coming. That night I didn't sleep. I just stared at the ceiling of that cold, dusty room in the back of the house my son had turned into my prison. 30 days, he said. 30 days because I coughed once. But it wasn't the cough that kept me awake. It was the words I overheard earlier that evening. Mom won't notice. My own son saying that while quietly spending the money I had saved for years. Money I earned after my husband passed away. Money I protected carefully, because I never wanted to become a burden to anyone, especially not my own child. At first I cried. I won't lie about that. I cried quietly into my pillow so no one would hear me through the walls. But somewhere in the middle of the night, something inside me shifted. The sadness slowly turned into something else. Resolve. Because the truth was becoming clearer with every passing hour. My son wasn't protecting his wife from a virus. He was protecting himself from responsibility. And isolating me made it easier to control everything, including my money. I sat up in bed around 3 o'clock in the morning and looked around the little room. A cracked window, a small suitcase, and a door that led to the backyard. For the first time in weeks, I noticed something important. The door wasn't locked. Daniel had assumed I would stay exactly where he told me to stay. Like a quiet old woman who obeys every rule. He underestimated me. Slowly, I stood up and packed the few things I had. Some clothes, my identification, my phone charger, and the small envelope where I kept a little emergency cash. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from determination. Before leaving, I looked back at the tiny room one last time. 30 days, he said. But I wasn't staying another hour. I quietly opened the back door. The cool night air hit my face as I stepped outside. And for the first time in weeks, I felt free. I didn't leave a note. I didn't send a message. I didn't say goodbye. Because if my own son could abandon me in my own home, then he didn't deserve an explanation. I walked down the street slowly, pulling my coat tighter around me. Every step felt strange. Like I was starting a completely new life at my age. But I knew exactly what I had to do first. I needed proof. The next morning, I went straight to a clinic. A real test. A real doctor. No assumptions. No lies. Just the truth. The nurse was kind. She noticed I looked tired and asked if everything was okay. I just smiled politely and said I needed a COVID test. 2 hours later, the doctor walked into the room holding my results. He smiled. Good news, he said. You're completely clear. No COVID. Not even a hint of infection. Just a small seasonal cough. I sat there quietly holding the paper in my hands. Part of me wanted to cry again. But this time it wasn't sadness. It was confirmation. My son had locked his own mother away for nothing. Or worse, he knew the truth and simply didn't care. But that wasn't the biggest shock. The biggest shock came later that afternoon when I visited my bank. The young banker looked concerned as she pulled up my account. Ma'am, she said gently, there have been several large withdrawals from your savings. I already knew what she was going to say next. And when she said my son's name, my heart hardened. Thousands of dollars were gone. Money I had trusted him with. Money he was spending while I sat alone cooking soup in that dusty room. But instead of breaking down, I did something Daniel would never expect. I withdrew every remaining dollar from that account. Every single cent. Then I opened a brand new account in my name only. And as I walked out of that bank, holding my new bank card, I made a promise to myself. Daniel thought he had control. He thought isolating me made me weak. But he had no idea what was coming next. Because a few weeks later, something unexpected happened. Lauren, the wife he was trying so hard to protect from me, suddenly became very, very sick. And the moment Daniel realized how serious it was, guess who he came running to for money? That's right, me. But what my son didn't know was that his mother had changed. And this time, I was ready. About 3 weeks passed after I left that house. 3 peaceful weeks. For the first time in a long while, I was waking up without fear. I rented a small room in a quiet neighborhood on the edge of town. Nothing fancy, just a clean bed, a small kitchen, and a window that let in warm morning sunlight. But it felt like freedom. No one telling me where I could walk. No one treating me like a disease. And most importantly, no one touching my money. I spent those days quietly rebuilding my life. I moved my savings into a secure account. I even spoke to a financial advisor who helped me protect everything legally, so no one could access it without my permission. Not even Daniel. Sometimes I wondered if my son had noticed I was gone. But he never called. Not once. No message. No apology. Nothing. And honestly, that silence told me everything I needed to know. Then one rainy afternoon, about 23 days after I left, someone knocked on my door. 3 heavy knocks. I remember looking up from my tea, confused. No one knew where I lived. At least that's what I thought. When I opened the door, my heart stopped. Daniel was standing there. My son. But he didn't look like the confident man who ordered me into isolation weeks earlier. He looked exhausted. His hair was messy. His eyes were red. His clothes were wrinkled like he hadn't slept in days. For a moment we just stared at each other. Then he spoke. Mom, thank God I found you. His voice sounded desperate. And suddenly I understood something important. People only search this hard when they need something. I stayed calm. How did you find me? I asked quietly. I called the bank, he said. They told me you moved your account and left the house. Of course he did. Not to check if I was safe, but because he noticed the money was gone. Typical. He stepped closer to the door. Mom, I need your help. There it was. I didn't say anything. I simply waited. And then he dropped the news. Lauren is in the hospital, he said quickly. She collapsed 2 days ago. The doctors say she needs surgery. His voice shook slightly. They want a large payment before they schedule it. Insurance isn't covering everything. He looked at me with the same eyes he used when he was a little boy asking for something. But this time, something felt very different. Mom, I need money, he said. There it was. The real reason he had searched the entire city to find me. Not love. Not guilt. Not regret. Money. For a moment, the old version of me almost answered. The mother who always forgave. The mother who always sacrificed. But then another memory surfaced. The dusty room. The cold nights. Cooking alone while hearing them laugh in the main house. And the words he said through the door. Mom, if this keeps going, I might have to move you somewhere else permanently. My heart hardened. I looked directly at him. Daniel, I said slowly. Do you remember something? He frowned slightly. What? The day you told me I had COVID. He shifted uncomfortably. Mom, this isn't the time for that. Oh, I think it is, I replied calmly. You locked me in the back of the house for 30 days. That was for safety. And you told me not to come near your wife. He rubbed his forehead impatiently. Mom, please. Lauren is sick. I crossed my arms gently. Yes, I said. And I'm very sorry to hear that. For a second, hope appeared in his eyes. But then I added something he wasn't expecting. But tell me something first. He blinked. What? How much of my money did you spend while I was locked away? The color drained from his face. Because suddenly, this wasn't a helpless old woman standing in front of him anymore. This was someone asking for answers. And Daniel wasn't ready for what came next. Because I hadn't even begun teaching him the lesson he deserved. And what I revealed to him in the next 5 minutes would make him wish he had never knocked on my door. Daniel's face went completely still when I asked the question. How much of my money did you spend while I was locked away? For a moment he didn't answer. He just stood there in the hallway of my small apartment, blinking like he hadn't expected the conversation to go in that direction. Mom, please, he said finally, rubbing the back of his neck. Lauren is in the hospital. This isn't the time to talk about money. I looked at him quietly. Funny how quickly people say money doesn't matter when they need yours. I think it's exactly the time, I said calmly. He sighed, clearly irritated. Mom, I told you before. I was just managing your account. Paying a few things. It's not a big deal. Not a big deal. Thousands of dollars disappearing while I sat alone in that cold back room. And to him it wasn't a big deal. I walked to the small kitchen table and pulled out a chair. Sit, I said. He hesitated but eventually sat down across from me. The rain outside tapped softly against the window. And for a moment the room was completely quiet. Then I slid a piece of paper across the table. My bank statement. Every withdrawal. Every transfer. Every dollar he took. Daniel glanced at the paper, and his eyes widened. You went to the bank? Yes, I said. He stared at the numbers like he was trying to make them disappear. Mom, I can explain. Oh, I'm sure you can, I said gently. But before you do, let me tell you something. I leaned back in my chair. The day you told me I had COVID, I believed you. He looked up at me. I trusted my own son. I paused, letting the words settle in the room. So I stayed in that dusty room in the back of the house. I cooked alone. I ate alone. I didn't come near you or Lauren because you said it was dangerous. His shoulders dropped slightly. But while I was sitting there wondering if I was sick, you were helping yourself to my savings. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. And do you know something else? I continued. The very next day after I left the house, I went to a clinic. His eyes flickered. And guess what the doctor told me? Silence. I never had COVID. The room suddenly felt colder. Daniel shifted in his chair. Well, maybe the symptoms were mild. No, I said firmly. There were no symptoms. Just a cough. A simple cough that gave him the perfect excuse to isolate me. For the first time since he arrived, Daniel looked nervous. Mom. I was just trying to protect Lauren. Really? Yes. Then explain why my savings disappeared. He looked down again. And that's when I saw something I hadn't seen in his face for a long time. Guilt. But guilt wasn't enough anymore. Daniel, I said quietly, while you were treating me like a stranger in my own home, I was thinking. He looked up slowly. Thinking about what? About how easy it was for you. His brow furrowed. What do you mean? How easily you locked your mother away, I said. How easily you believed I was a problem that needed to be kept out of sight. He rubbed his face with both hands. Mom, please. I don't have time for this. Lauren needs surgery. There it is again, I said softly. Money. Always back to money. He leaned forward desperately. Mom, I'll pay you back, okay? Every dollar. I promise. I just need help right now. His voice cracked slightly. If Lauren doesn't get this surgery soon, things could get really bad. For a brief moment, my heart softened. Because no matter what he had done, he was still my son. But then another memory appeared in my mind. His voice through the door. If this keeps going, I might have to move you somewhere else permanently. I looked directly into his eyes. Daniel, I said calmly. Tell me something honestly. He swallowed. What? If I was still sitting in that room right now, coughing and cooking alone? I paused. Would you have come looking for me? He didn't answer. Because we both knew the truth. And the silence between us said more than any excuse he could invent. But what Daniel didn't realize yet was that I hadn't told him the most important thing. Not about the money. Not about the doctor. And definitely not about the decision I made after leaving that house. Because the next thing I said was going to change everything. And it was the moment my son finally understood that the woman sitting in front of him was no longer the same mother he left locked in that dusty room. Daniel sat across from me at the small kitchen table. His hands clasped together like a man holding on to the last piece of hope he had left. Outside, the rain was getting heavier. But inside that quiet little apartment, something much heavier hung in the air between us. Truth. For years, I had been the kind of mother who forgave everything. The kind who believed family always deserved another chance. But the woman sitting in that chair now was not the same woman who had been locked in a dusty back room like she was a problem that needed to be hidden. I folded my hands calmly on the table. Daniel, I said gently, there's something you need to understand. He looked up quickly. Mom, please. If this is about the money, I swear I'll pay you back. I'll figure something out. I shook my head slowly. This isn't about the money anymore. He frowned. Then what is it about? I leaned forward slightly. It's about respect. The words seemed to land heavily in the room. You treated me like I was contagious. Like I was dangerous. Like I was a burden. Mom, that's not. You locked your own mother away, I said quietly. He stopped talking. For a moment, his eyes dropped to the table again. I thought I was protecting Lauren, he muttered. I watched him carefully. You didn't even check on me. His jaw tightened. 30 days, Daniel. You said 30 days. The memory seemed to bother him now. But it didn't change what had happened. I heard you laughing in the living room, I continued. I heard you watching movies. Living your life like nothing had happened. While I sat alone wondering if I had become a stranger in my own home. He rubbed his forehead again, clearly overwhelmed. Mom, I didn't think it was that bad. Of course he didn't. People rarely see the damage they cause when they're comfortable. But now Lauren is sick, he said quickly. And I don't know what to do. His voice cracked again. For the first time, I could see real fear in his eyes. But fear has a funny way of revealing people's true priorities. Because he wasn't there to ask how I was doing. He was there because he needed something. Mom, he said quietly, the hospital needs a deposit before they schedule the surgery. If we can't pay it, they might delay the procedure. He swallowed hard. I've already used most of my savings. Of course he had. And the rest, he continued slowly. I thought you might help. I looked at him for a long moment. Then I stood up and walked to the small cabinet near the wall. Inside was a folder. A thick one. I carried it back to the table and placed it in front of him. Daniel looked confused. What's this? Open it. He flipped the folder open slowly. Inside were documents. Bank records. Legal papers. Account confirmations. And one very important form. A legal notice removing him from any access to my finances. His eyes widened. You cut me off? I protected myself, I corrected calmly. His face went pale. Mom, how could you do this right now? I almost laughed at that question. Right now? After everything that had happened? I did it 3 weeks ago, I said. The silence in the room became heavier than the rain outside. You left the house, he whispered. Yes. You moved your money? Yes. And you didn't tell me? No. He leaned back in his chair, stunned. For the first time in his life, Daniel was realizing something. His mother had finally stopped being predictable. But there was something else in that folder. Something he hadn't noticed yet. Because when he turned the next page, his entire expression changed. Mom, what is this? I folded my hands again and looked at him calmly. That, I said softly, is the beginning of the lesson you never thought you'd have to learn. His hands started shaking slightly as he read the paper. Because what he had just discovered was something that could completely destroy the comfortable life he thought he still had. And suddenly, the desperate son who came asking for help was realizing he might actually be the one about to lose everything. Daniel stared at the document in the folder like it had just exploded in his hands. His eyes moved across the page again and again, like he was hoping the words would somehow change. But they didn't. Mom, he said slowly, his voice tight. What is this? I watched him quietly from across the table. That, I said calmly, is a notice from my lawyer. The color drained from his face. Your lawyer? Yes. His hands tightened around the paper. But why would you need a lawyer? The answer to that question should have been obvious. Still, I spoke gently. Because when I went to the bank and saw thousands of dollars missing from my savings, I realized something. Daniel swallowed. What? I realized I needed to protect myself. He quickly flipped through the rest of the documents in the folder. Legal forms, statements, account protections, and one very specific document that made his hands tremble. Mom, you filed a financial abuse report? The room went completely silent. I nodded slowly. Yes. His chair scraped slightly against the floor as he leaned back in shock. You reported me? His voice was louder now, disbelief mixed with panic. I didn't report you, I corrected gently. I reported what happened. Daniel ran both hands through his hair. This is crazy, he muttered. Mom, you're blowing this way out of proportion. Am I? Yes. I was helping manage your money. You gave me access. I gave you trust, I replied quietly. He froze. And for a moment, neither of us spoke. The rain outside had slowed to a soft drizzle now, but inside the room the tension felt heavier than ever. Mom, Daniel said after a moment, lowering his voice again. If this goes through, it could cause serious problems. I tilted my head slightly. What kind of problems? He hesitated. You know, legal problems. There it was. Fear. Real fear. And for the first time since he walked through my door, Daniel looked like the little boy who used to get caught doing something wrong. Daniel, I said softly. Do you remember the night you came to the door of that back room? He frowned. What night? The night you told me that if my illness continued, you might have to move me somewhere else permanently. His eyes dropped. That's not what I meant. But that's what you said. He didn't respond. I leaned forward slightly. Do you know what it feels like to hear your own child talk about you like you're a problem that needs to be relocated? His voice came out quieter now. Mom. I was stressed. You were comfortable, I corrected. He rubbed his face again, clearly overwhelmed. Okay, fine, he said quickly. Maybe I made mistakes. Maybe I should have checked on you more. More. He hadn't checked on me at all. But right now Lauren is in the hospital, he continued urgently. If you push this legal thing forward, I could lose my job. I could get into serious trouble. His voice cracked slightly. And if that happens, how am I supposed to pay for Lauren's surgery? I studied his face carefully, because something about the way he said that sentence told me something very important. Even now, even after everything, he still believed this situation was about money. But it wasn't. Not anymore. Daniel, I said calmly. Tell me something honestly. He looked up nervously. What? If Lauren wasn't sick right now, would you have come looking for me? His silence answered the question instantly. The truth hung in the air like a heavy cloud. And suddenly Daniel looked very small sitting in that chair. Because the reality he was facing was something he had never experienced before. Consequences. But I still hadn't told him the most surprising part yet. Because while Daniel had been searching the city for me, someone else had been doing a little investigating of their own. And the next piece of information I revealed was going to make my son realize that his problems were about to become much bigger than just money. Much bigger than a hospital bill. And when he heard the name of the person who had contacted me that morning, his entire world was going to start falling apart. Daniel was still sitting across from me, staring at the folder like it had betrayed him. His shoulders looked heavier now. Not like the confident man who once ordered me into that dusty back room, but like someone slowly realizing he had made a mistake he couldn't easily fix. But the hardest part of the truth still hadn't reached him yet. I took a slow sip of tea and placed the cup back on the table. Daniel, I said calmly, someone called me this morning. His head lifted slightly. Who? I studied his face carefully before answering. The bank's fraud department. The reaction was immediate. His eyes widened. They called you? Yes. He sat up straighter, suddenly very alert. What did they say? I folded my hands together. They asked if I had authorized several large withdrawals from my savings account over the last month. Daniel swallowed. And what did you tell them? I held his gaze. I told them the truth. The air in the room felt thicker now. And what exactly is the truth to you? He asked cautiously. I leaned back in my chair. The truth is that I gave my son access to help me with small bills. Daniel nodded quickly. Yes, exactly. But the truth is also, I continued, that thousands of dollars disappeared while I was isolated in a room and had no way of checking my account. His face tightened. Mom, you're making it sound like I stole from you. I raised my eyebrow slightly. Didn't you? Silence. His eyes moved back to the folder on the table. Look, he said finally, lowering his voice. I was under a lot of pressure. Lauren and I had some expenses come up. I was planning to replace the money later. Later. That magical word people use when they want to justify doing something wrong today. But you didn't ask, I said quietly. You just took it. He looked frustrated now. I was going to tell you eventually. I almost smiled. Eventually. The room fell silent again. Outside, the rain had completely stopped, and a faint beam of sunlight pushed through the clouds. Daniel suddenly leaned forward again, desperation returning to his voice. Mom, please. If this turns into a legal issue, it could ruin everything for me. I tilted my head slightly. Everything. My job, my reputation, everything. He rubbed his face again. I could even be investigated. The word hung in the air like a warning. Investigated. For the first time, Daniel truly looked afraid. But something else was happening inside me too. Because hearing his fear reminded me of something. The nights I sat alone in that cold room wondering if anyone cared about me. The uncertainty. The loneliness. The humiliation. Now the balance of power had quietly shifted. But Daniel still believed he could fix this with the same solution he always used. Money. Mom, he said carefully. If you help me right now, I promise I'll fix everything. I'll pay you back. I'll take care of you properly this time. This time. As if respect could be turned on and off like a light switch. I looked at him for a long moment. Then I asked a question he wasn't expecting. Daniel, do you remember Mrs. Carter? His brow furrowed. Mrs. Carter? Yes. The woman who lives across the street from our house. His eyes flickered slightly. What about her? I leaned forward. Well, she called me yesterday. Daniel froze. Why would she call you? I watched his face carefully. Because she saw something interesting the night I left the house. The color slowly drained from his face again. Mom, what are you talking about? I slid another paper from the folder across the table. A printed photograph. Daniel looked down at it. And suddenly, his breathing changed. Because the picture showed something he never expected anyone else to see. And the moment he realized what that photo proved, my son understood something terrifying. This situation wasn't just about missing money anymore. It was about evidence. Real evidence. And what Mrs. Carter had captured that night could change everything. Daniel stared down at the photograph in his hands. At first he didn't say anything. But I watched his face carefully, and within seconds I saw the exact moment he understood what he was looking at. His breathing slowed. His fingers tightened around the edge of the paper. Where did you get this? He asked quietly. I folded my hands on the table. Mrs. Carter. He looked up at me again, confusion and panic fighting across his face. But why would she have a picture of this? Because, I said calmly, she has a security camera pointed toward the street. Daniel swallowed. The photograph clearly showed him standing in the driveway late at night. His car trunk was open, and in his hands were several storage boxes. Boxes that looked very familiar. They were the same boxes I kept in the hallway closet of the house. The ones where I stored old documents, family records, and a small lockbox where I sometimes kept cash. Daniel quickly placed the photo back on the table. That doesn't mean anything, he said quickly. I raised an eyebrow. No. No, he repeated. I was just moving things around in the house. At midnight? I asked gently. He didn't answer. The silence stretched across the room. I leaned forward slightly. You know what Mrs. Carter told me when she called? Daniel stared at the table. She said she noticed something strange that night. He rubbed the back of his neck nervously. Mom, people move things all the time. Yes, I agreed softly. But not usually while their mother is locked in the back of the house. That sentence landed hard. Daniel finally looked up at me again, and I could see the tension building behind his eyes. You're twisting everything, he muttered. Am I? Yes. You left the house on your own. I tilted my head slightly. After being isolated there for weeks. That was for safety. And the missing money? His jaw tightened. You're acting like I committed some kind of crime. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I reached into the folder again and pulled out another sheet of paper. This time it wasn't a photograph. It was a printed message. I slid it slowly across the table. Daniel hesitated before picking it up. What's this? Read it. His eyes scanned the page, and suddenly his shoulders stiffened. Because it wasn't just a message. It was a written statement. From Mrs. Carter. She had described exactly what she saw that night. Daniel carrying boxes, opening the trunk of his car, driving away, and returning again about 20 minutes later. Over and over. His face slowly turned pale. Mom, this is ridiculous. Is it? She misunderstood what she saw. I gave a small nod. That's possible. Relief flickered briefly across his face. Then I added something that erased it instantly. But security cameras don't misunderstand. His eyes snapped up. What? I held his gaze. Mrs. Carter saved the footage. The room went completely still. For a few seconds Daniel didn't move at all. Then he leaned back slowly in his chair. You're serious? Yes. He exhaled heavily. You went really far with this, Mom. I almost smiled at that. Far. All I had done was finally stop ignoring the truth. Daniel, I said quietly, do you know what hurts the most about all of this? He didn't answer. It's not the money. His eyes flickered again. It's the way you treated me. The memory of that dusty back room flashed through my mind again. The cold nights. The silence. The humiliation. You made me feel like I was a problem that needed to disappear, I said softly. Daniel looked away. Mom, I didn't mean for things to go this far. But the truth was, they already had. And now the situation was far bigger than either of us sitting at that table. Because Daniel still didn't know something important. Something that had happened earlier that afternoon. I watched him carefully before speaking again. Daniel, when Mrs. Carter sent me the footage. He looked up quickly. Yes. I forwarded it to someone. His entire body went still. To who? He asked slowly. I paused for just a moment. Long enough for the tension to fill the room again. Then I answered. To the same people who called me this morning. Daniel's eyes widened. The bank's fraud department? I shook my head. No. The word left my mouth quietly. Someone else. And when Daniel realized who had just received that footage, he finally understood something terrifying. His situation had just become much more serious than he ever imagined. Daniel stared at me like the floor had just disappeared under his feet. To someone else? He repeated slowly. His voice sounded thin now. Almost fragile. Yes, I said calmly. The silence between us stretched for several long seconds. Then he leaned forward quickly. Mom, who did you send it to? I could see the tension building in his face. His fingers tapped nervously against the edge of the table. For the first time in his life, Daniel was realizing something very uncomfortable. He wasn't in control anymore. I took a slow breath before answering. I sent the footage to my attorney. The reaction was immediate. Your attorney? He said, his voice rising. Yes. Daniel pushed his chair back slightly, standing halfway up before sitting again. This is insane, he muttered. No. Irrapliaquiatli. What happened to me was insane. He shook his head, trying to process everything. Mom, lawyers don't need to be involved in this. We're family. Family. The word sounded strange coming from him now. Because family was something he hadn't remembered when he shut the door on me in that cold back section of the house. You're right, I said softly. We are family. For a moment, hope flickered across his face again. But then I finished the sentence. And that's exactly why this hurt so much. His shoulders dropped again. The fight in him was starting to fade. Mom, please, he said quietly. If this turns into a legal case, things could get very serious. I know. You could ruin my life. I studied his face carefully. The panic in his voice sounded real now. But it was a panic built on consequences, not regret. And there's a big difference between those two things. Daniel, I said calmly. Do you remember what you told me through that door? He frowned slightly. What door? The door of the room you locked me in. His eyes dropped immediately. You said if my illness continued, you might have to move me somewhere else permanently. His jaw tightened. I didn't mean it like that. But that's how it sounded. The room fell quiet again. Daniel leaned forward suddenly. Mom, listen. I was wrong, okay? I should have checked on you more. I should have handled the money differently. He ran his hands through his hair again. I admit that. This was the closest thing to an apology I had heard from him so far. But something still felt incomplete. Because he wasn't apologizing for hurting me. He was apologizing because he was scared. Lauren is still in the hospital, he added quickly. There it is, I said softly. He blinked. What? You only came here because you needed help. That's not true. Then why didn't you call me when I left the house? He froze. One simple question, and no answer. The truth sat between us like a heavy stone. After a long moment, Daniel spoke again. So what happens now? He asked quietly. I folded my hands together. That depends. On what? On whether you're finally ready to take responsibility. His eyes searched my face. What does that mean? I stood up slowly and walked to the window. Outside, the clouds had finally cleared. The street was calm and quiet again. For the first time in weeks, everything felt peaceful. Behind me, Daniel's voice came again. Mom, what are you going to do? I turned around and looked directly at him. That depends on the choice you make next. His brow furrowed. What choice? I walked back to the table and gently closed the folder of documents. The choice to finally tell the truth. Daniel swallowed. What truth? The full truth, I said quietly. About the money. About the boxes. And about why you really locked your own mother in that room. His face went completely still, because he understood something in that moment. The next words out of his mouth would decide everything. Whether this ended as a family lesson or a legal disaster. And the truth he was about to confess was something even I wasn't fully prepared to hear. Daniel sat in my small apartment, the folder still open in front of him. His face looked smaller than I had ever seen it, like the weight of his actions was finally crushing him. He swallowed hard and avoided my eyes. Mom. He began, then stopped. I waited. Calmly. Quietly. I didn't need to speak. The silence was louder than anything I could have said. I was wrong, he finally whispered. There it was. The confession I had waited for. But I didn't smile. Not yet. You locked me in a room, I said softly. For 30 days. Because I coughed once. You told me I had COVID and couldn't come near Lauren. You didn't check on me. And while I was alone, you took my savings. You made me feel like I was a problem. His face paled further. Mom. Stop, I said gently. No excuses. Not this time. He nodded, swallowing again, clearly trembling. I didn't realize. You didn't realize? I repeated. Do you know how it feels to be treated like a stranger in your own home? To be locked away in a dusty, cold room while your own child laughs in the main house? Do you know what it feels like to see your own money disappearing while no one cares? His lips pressed together. I could see the shame in his eyes now. Finally. I'm sorry, he whispered, almost inaudible. That was the word I had been waiting for. But I wasn't finished. Not yet. You see, Daniel, I continued. I didn't just walk away and hide. I left your house. I moved my savings. I got a full medical checkup and confirmed I never had COVID. I protected myself. And I ensured that you couldn't access my money ever again. His eyes widened. Mommy, you really did all that? Yes, I said quietly. Because I finally realized something important. You can't take advantage of someone who loves you and expects trust without consequences. He sat silently, head bowed. And then, I added, you came to my door begging for help. Not because you cared about me. Not because you regretted hurting me. But because Lauren was sick and you needed money. That's when it hit me. You didn't just disrespect me. You thought you could manipulate me for your benefit. His voice trembled now. Mom. I didn't. You didn't what? I asked softly. You didn't consider how I felt? You didn't think about the consequences of your actions? You didn't treat me like family? He swallowed hard. I was selfish. Finally. That was the word I needed. Selfish. I leaned forward and placed a hand over his. Yes, Daniel. Selfish. And that's why I made sure you couldn't hurt me again. Not with money. Not with lies. Not with fear. He looked up at me, eyes glossy. Mom. I see that now. I can't believe I did that to you. I know, I said softly. But here's the thing. I forgave you in my heart, but I didn't let you walk over me again. Forgiveness doesn't mean weakness. It means you've earned a chance to prove you can do better. He nodded slowly, tears forming in his eyes. I will. I promise. I'll make it right. I'll repay every cent, and I'll make sure I treat you right from now on. I smiled gently. Finally, the lesson had landed. You've learned something very important today, I said. That respect and honesty matter more than money, more than excuses, more than fear. And that no one, not even your mother, should ever be treated like she doesn't matter. He nodded, choking on his words. I understand, Mom. I really do. Thank you for teaching me. I'm so sorry. I reached out and hugged him. A long, gentle hug. And in that moment, I knew that the balance had finally shifted. I had been hurt. I had been disrespected. I had been locked away. But I had also protected myself. I had regained my independence, my dignity, my health, and my savings. And most importantly, I had taught my son the lesson he would never forget. From that day forward, Daniel never treated me like a problem again. He treated me like family. And I finally felt the freedom of being respected, loved, and safe. Because sometimes the strongest revenge isn't anger. It's wisdom. It's patience. It's proving that no one can take what you worked for without consequences. And that respect is earned, never demanded. And in the end, I had all of it. The lesson had been learned. And my heart finally felt at peace.